for the Indians. 1 run on, let's see, 1 hit. That's all. We got 1 goddamn hit.
You can't say goddamn on the air.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
From the Gateway Lounge in Sioux Falls, it's Nobody's Listening Anyway. Here are your hosts, John Gaskins and Matt Zimmer.
T-1 week to game week 2026 for our college football teams, those that we know and love here in southeastern South Dakota. So here at the Gateway Lounge, you know we are serious, Matt Zimmer, when we've got helmets right in front of us. The helmets are trumping our drinks.
We got a show.
Yeah, I mean, usually your Budweiser and my Tito's Press are the stars of the visual portion of this, plus the whatever's behind us, the golden tea. But this is our college football preview show. We've got the Jacks and the Yotes, who are both bona fide Missouri Valley Football Conference contenders once again, national championship contenders, or maybe not. We will discuss. We're going to break down the teams, the most important storylines, their schedules, and then we'll also do it later on with Augustana and USF and some of the other teams that aren't in Division I. And so here we go. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you tired of practice? Or are you ready to see some games?
I never get tired of practice. I
Wow.
went to Augie yesterday, USD on Sunday, USF on Saturday. I haven't had a day off in about 2 weeks, and I'm exhausted, but I'm loving it.
Yeah. Here I wake up and open up my laptop as I get coffee on my patio, enjoying my morning, and there's Zimmer at another practice. I'm like, I don't know if I'm jealous or not, but you're definitely getting the feel of it. And by the way, Zach Borg Daily, Sioux Falls Live, and Midwest Sports Plus, Camp Confidentials. He is racking up high school football reports as well. We've done MVFC Media Day in July, and then we had our Jackrabbit Media Day last week. We took the trip to Brookings and talked to a bunch of folks, and on happy hour tomorrow, we're talking Wednesday, August 19th, we'll have our USD Day. We're not going down to Vermilion, and we're not compiling a bunch of interviews, but we are honing in on a couple of players in Charles Pierre Jr., the running back. You remember him, right? He was one of the nation's leaders in rushers 2 years ago. And Gabriel Hardman on the defensive side of the ball. So we're looking forward to a Yote show tomorrow. And so before we dive into both teams, one of these teams is ranked number 3 in the stats preseason poll and picked to win the Valley strongly, 28 out of 34 votes. That'd be the Jackrabbits. Another, USD, you picked them 4th, the 5th overall preseason poll, ranked number 12 nationally, still very strong. But it feels like despite the fact that the Yotes finished 2025 in a better spot, making it to the quarterfinals and losing to the same team that beat the Jacks in the round of 16, Montana, that the Jacks are the team in South Dakota this year. Many people feel like they could get back to national championship form.
Well, they have the fewest question marks, and that's kind of what we've been talking about all through camp, and we've seen it in camp too, I've been to enough SDSU practices that I almost kind of feel like, okay, I'm good. I know what this team has. I know who's playing where. There weren't a ton of position battles. There just aren't a lot of question marks. There's always, are you going to stay healthy? How much is this player going to improve? How much is this position group going to improve? But you kind of saw all that right from the jump. The big question marks coming from last year to this year were sort of defensive line. That has looked, I would say it's been a best case scenario. I don't think they could possibly ask for more than what they've gotten out of that group so far. We already knew how deep they were at linebacker. We knew how deep they were at receiver, tight end. All those things are filling in. Backup quarterback was another big question mark. I feel like that's been answered. I think Josh Holst is going to be QB2, but that is in no way a negative towards Jack Henry. He looks better than he did last year. They just happened to bring in a guy who started games at the FBS level. But you know what that means? They're 3 quarterbacks deep, and they had to go 3 quarterbacks deep last year, and it hurt them. Yes. That's what led to their losing streak. Of course. If that happens again this year, they're going to be much better prepared for it. When I look at the Jacks, I think the biggest question mark to me is probably the running back room. And again, that's not to suggest that I'm worried about it or they don't have good players there. But they got 3 guys coming back that played as true freshmen, and then Ramon McKinney, who transferred in from Division II. And I think he's only a sophomore or a junior. He's got a couple years left, too. They just don't have, last year Julius Lawford was a proven commodity. You knew what you had with him. They don't have that. That doesn't mean that they're not going to be fine there. I think they will be. But it's interesting to see how that's going to play out, who's going to get the lion's share of the carries, how are they going to, is it going to be, will one guy emerge as the guy, a Charles Pierre and LJ Phillips, or will they just, will 4 guys rush for 500 yards? We'll see how that plays out. So in that respect, I kind of feel like I know what I'm going to see from South Dakota State on August 29th against Stetson. With USD, it's not as certain. They came in with a lot more question marks, a third new coach in 3 years, and then obviously the quarterback situation has been the big question mark, having to replace most of their offensive line. The running back room obviously is loaded. I don't think USD is a team that I would worry about. I don't think they're not going to be a playoff team. It says something, obviously, about the Valley that they were picked 5th in the league and they're 12th in the national rankings. Yeah. That just goes to show you how strong the top of the Valley is. But there are question marks.
Yeah.
And I was at their scrimmage on Sunday, and I kind of walked in there saying, okay, maybe this is the day that Austin Majeski nails down the starting quarterback job, and he didn't do that. He might still be the starting quarterback on August 29th against Central Connecticut State at the Dakota Dome, but that's still up in the air. Jackson Proctor is still very much in the mix. Nevin Cremascoli's in the mix. I thought it was significant that Fitz admitted that we could see all 3 of them playing or 2 of them playing. We'll see how it goes. I don't, you saw his comments to me after the scrimmage. Sometimes the words look different than they sound, I don't think his tone was certainly not disappointment or negativity. In fact, when he was talking about how these last 10 days have really been hard on these guys, he meant that more as in because we've really been cracking the whip on them. He said it almost as if he was proud of it. Like, we've been putting these guys through it because we have to. Because if we just said, how good is the Valley? The 5th place team is a top 12 team in the nation. Well, that goes to show you that there's 4 teams above you that are really, really good. They can't be bringing these, whether it's Austin Majeski, the freshman, or one of the other 2 guys, they can't be bringing them along with baby steps. They got to throw them into the deep end of the pool and find out who can swim. So how much is that something to be worried about if you're a USD fan? I don't really know. I'd like to give you a reassuring, don't worry, it's going to be fine. Maybe it is. I still think they feel really good about those guys. But you can also tell that they hoped maybe one guy had asserted himself by now, and that hasn't happened.
You're sounding like you're that Vitztham is like a golf coach making his players tee off from the tiger tees from the way back when they're going to be playing from the blue tees when the tournament comes, and everything's going to seem easier because of what they prepared for, which, that's one way to go about it. So in light of that topic of quarterback, which is obviously the A topic for both of these schools, but particularly for USD, where you're replacing one of the best ever, a 3-year starter in Aiden Bauman, 3 quarterfinal appearances, and you're unsure of where things are headed. For those who are slightly Johnny-come-lately, you realized the calendar has slipped to August. Oh, my gosh, we're a week away from the games, and maybe you just haven't been keeping up with our constant coverage here all spring and summer long on Happy Hour. Here's Matt Vitztham from MVFC Media Day explaining the strengths of each of these quarterbacks in the 3-horse race. How did the season end with the 3-horse quarterback race? I'm sure you've picked a winner and you're ready to tell us all this right now.
I'm not going to break it today, sorry.
No, have you really picked a winner?
We have not.
Okay.
No. We're going to head in here, I think, by the end of kind of that first week, 5-8 practices in, we're going to talk about moving a guy kind of into that role and taking all of the reps with the ones.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of been our plan for the first 5-6 months here is, it's been pretty open. Yeah. See if a guy can really kind of take a hold of it and keep that job. So like where we're at, continue to say that, like who we've surrounded them with, more importantly. Yeah. And just to continue to reiterate, we don't need you to be Aiden Bauman. Be yourself, right? Yeah. And that'll be plenty good with those 3 guys.
You had a few practices, several practices after we last talked. And if there's not like one guy overall that emerged, what did you see? If you want to go through them, bing, bing, bing. Yeah. How would you evaluate what you saw, especially the positives from each guy? from spring practice.
Yeah, I think Nevin Cremascoli, like I know what I'm going to – we know what we're going to get with Nevin, right? And there's a certain level of comfort with that, right? And there's that consistency factor of who he is, right? Austin Majeski, the freshman, would be a redshirt freshman next year. He's got that wow factor. You know what I mean? He's got a big arm. He's going to make some big plays, just kind of honing in on, limiting the damage of a freshman, right? Yeah. And I think that's going to be key for him in kind of this race. And then Jackson Proctor, for him, his legs, right? His ability to run the football and our ability as a staff to adapt to that type of quarterback. That's kind of the three things I would say kind of coming out of that we think we know about those three guys right now.
Yeah, so there you have it. And again, we'll go back to the most recent practice that you saw on Sunday, and none of them quite distinguished themselves. A week before that, you had gone to practice, and before you saw much, Vitz was like, you didn't even have to ask him. He's like, there's our guy. He's, and it was Austin Majeski, the freshman who's a two-time Gatorade Player of the Year in Colorado. That's a big state with a lot of people. And he's at USD. That seems major. And this was partly because he has the best arm, and he also has plenty of athleticism.
He does, but he's not a runner. And you get the sense that that's what's keeping Jackson Proctor and Nevin Cremascoli in the picture. Not that there haven't been, other factors. Majeski threw an interception on his first pass of the day. There was one point where he must have missed a read or something, but the quarterback coach pulled him aside and really kind of got after him. I mean, he wasn't like, browbeating him, but it was very clear that it was like, you're still not getting it, doing some teaching in the moment there. Proctor did look good as a runner. So did Cremascoli. And that was another one of the things Vitz said. He's like, those two guys give us something we haven't really had here. That's a little bit of a reference to Hayden Bauman. He was not a running threat. He did a good job to make himself maybe more elusive, more nimble back in the pocket, but he was never going to be a guy where you had, as an opposing defense, you had to game plan for, well, what if Hayden Bauman tucks it and runs, or what if they run quarterback power with Hayden Bauman? Yeah. That was never even part of the game plan. You didn't have to worry about it. So I think that's part of it, too, is if you're Matt Vitztham and Tim Morrison, the offensive coordinator, you're thinking, we could put some more stuff on the plate here. Yeah. We can give defenses more things to worry about. Those other two guys, they can run. So will you potentially see – I don't know. There's still a week and a half before the first game. Do you pick a starter and then just say we're going to give you however long? Do you say you're each going to get a few series? Do you play it by ear and kind of see how the game's going? Do you create for a Nevin Cremascoli a sort of just running quarterback package? Not that he can't throw there, but it's primarily we're bringing you in to be a running threat. Do you use Jackson Proctor as more of a you can do both with this guy, and then Majeski is your guy where you're I don't know. There's a lot of options when you have three quarterbacks, and I think that's the thing that Vitz is trying to get through here is let's look at this as a positive. Now the flip side of it, people always say if you have two quarterbacks or you have three quarterbacks, you don't have a quarterback. But if you have three that you feel good about and their skill sets are different, that does give you some options. And it's early in the season. Now, we've been talking about how Central Connecticut State isn't a pushover. It's not like when they opened with Northern State a couple years ago. There's a pretty good team, but it's still a team the Yotes should be able to beat handily, especially they still have Charles Pierre and Reed Watkins and the other stable of running backs. It's not like they're going to be asking these three guys to carry the load. You would hope Charles Pierre is going to come out and have a huge game and give them a lead, and then they can kind of use those reps for those guys to get a better feel for it. Because then after that, you have Northern Colorado. That's on the road, and that's a team that almost should have beat you in the Dome last year. But assuming you're not going to come out and lay an egg like you did in that game, that's a game where you can maybe give multiple quarterbacks some reps. They can hopefully win that game for you without having to put it on their back. And going into those third and fourth games, you start to say, okay, what do we got here? Is one guy separating himself? Are we going to make Austin Majeski sort of our franchise quarterback of the future here? Or are we going to go the whole year, playing two quarterbacks? Because we've seen places where that works. Minnesota State Mankato's been doing that for a decade. They always play two quarterbacks. Wow. And it always works for them.
Yes, it does.
That's an anomaly. I think most coaches don't like it. But if you can make it work, you can make it work. So that is something that, like I said, I'd love to be able to tell Yotes fans this is what's going to happen. We're going to have to wait and see for a little while longer.
Vitztham, a first-time head coach, and therefore it's his first time as the main voice, the lead voice of a program. Programmed us pretty well in spring and summer. We heard the bite a few minutes ago about how all these guys can bring something good to the table. The pure arm talent, and I think the pure overall talent of Majewski, which may win him the job. And then Cremascoli's the guy who's been in the program, knows the offense the best. Now, this is the same offensive coordinator, but as you've kind of alluded to, we might have a slightly different offense now that Aiden Bauman is no longer the quarterback. He was immobile. He was great at a bunch of things, but he was immobile. And then you had the transfer, Jackson Proctor. Well, that's a guy who's actually played at this level for a full season with an 8-2 record in the Ivy League. Not the best league, but a league in the FCS, and he knows how to win.
Was it Dartmouth? Is that what it was?
Yes. And what Vitz was telling us in both the spring and the summer is I said, what's going to decide this? And he said more nuanced little things like who has the best command of the huddle, who can get to the line of scrimmage and identify the defensive looks and make the right play call with
when
the
to
options
snap
in
the ball.
his head.
Yeah.
These are the kind of things that sound boring, but you'll hear Curtis Riggs say on broadcasts on Fridays and Saturdays, or the NFL guys. I don't know when we're ever going to hear from Tony Romo again, but you know what I'm saying. The analysts, that's an important thing, especially to former quarterbacks and former offensive coordinators and head coaches. How far that thing will go, because it's also who's going to do the best stuff before the snap and also make the right decisions after the snap. What USD was really good at as last season went on was avoiding big mistakes, avoiding turnovers. Aiden Bauman was a master of that, and sometimes they punted and you didn't notice, and a lot of times they were playing the field position game.
And they won some low-scoring, close games.
Absolutely.
You know, they probably one or two turnovers could have swung the deal in those games. You know, we're sitting here talking about they made it farther than any team in South Dakota. They almost lost to Northern Iowa. They almost lost to Indiana State.
Yes.
There were some
Northern Colorado.
Yeah.
They took a goal line stand against Northern Colorado.
Yeah.
And so when we go back to the quarterbacks, and then we'll touch on other spots on the field here for USD of note. But you mentioned they could tinker around with multiple quarterbacks as we look at the schedule. As you open with Central Connecticut State at home, 8-5 first-round playoff exit against Rhode Island last year.
They were picked to win their league again this year,
Okay.
so I assume that means they have something coming back.
Yep, the Northeast League. Northern Colorado, a team that's been just god-awful the last few years. But
ever since they went Division I, really.
Yeah. They will get a home game against the Coyotes. And remember, Lamar wasn't that good. They ended up being a top 25, top 30 quality team last year. But USD went to Lamar, a place where they thought they should win in Game 2 last year, and came out of there with a loss. So these aren't quite the pushovers that SDSU has on its non-con outside of Northwestern. And then you have Eastern Washington, another traditionally used to be an awesome team.
Used to be a powerhouse.
Used to be a powerhouse. Now they're not as good, but again, you sense that they're not pushovers. And then the big one, I think they got to have a quarterback decided by Boise State. That's not a game you expect to go in and win, but you want to be in tip-top shape. You want to have the I's dotted and the T's crossed.
You either want to have your guy, or if you're going to play two, you have a set system of how you're going to do it.
And then the very next week, they open conference play with Youngstown State, which is definitely
got picked second in the league.
A league contender this year, a team that's probably going to put up a lot of points with Bo Brungard, the reigning Walter Payton Player of the Year, as the quarterback. So you're going to need to score some points to keep up with them and not turn it over in what could be a shootout. So, it'll be interesting to see when the Coyotes land on who they're going to land on at quarterback. But as we've mentioned, look, you said the running back room, it starts with Charles Pierre Jr. This is a guy who was a top 5 rusher in the country 2 years ago, preseason All-American, and then, just blew out his knee, right? And then Game 2 against Lamar. And turned out they had a great offensive line, and they had another great running back in L.J. Phillips, and he went on to lead the nation in rushing for most of the year. And now he's going to be the backup tailback at Iowa. But you don't just have Charles Pierre Jr., who's going to be healthy, happy, motivated, and all that. Also, his dad was a prominent college football player. So, I mean, this guy eats, sleeps, and breathes it. Yeah, at Florida Atlantic under Howard Schnellenberger.
No kidding.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
His dad set a bunch of records there. He's like the best running back when he left in Florida
Atlantic
Atlantic history. Not much, no. I'll have to look that up, but I don't think so. But so this kid grew up eating, sleeping, breathing football, and this is it. This is his big year. He didn't go anywhere else. He's going to be a Coyote, and you expect a big year. But then you got Logan Jones. I mean, you got a guy who's going to be able to catch passes out of the backfield and be more of the scat back or the speed guy. You're going to have thunder and lightning there. And then the offensive line, although it only returns 1 of 5 starters, that one is Brock Wolf, who is a Kansas State transfer, who played in 13 of 15 games last year. And then listen to the size of the rest of the guys that may or may not be on that starting offensive line. 6'7", 310, 6'6", 315, 6'4", 300, 6'5", 305, 6'9", 320. I mean, the offensive lines get bigger and bigger every year, but that sounds like a Big Ten offensive line.
Yep, and even the only one returning starter thing is a little misleading. I think it's Ellingson started a few games. The prior year, he was hurt all last year. Jake Utley came in. He started something like 12, 13 FBS games. They have guys that have played at the FBS level, at the FCS level, and Grant Chapman, who's probably going to start this year. He played in every game last year. I think it's Crispy, the 6'9" dude, played a lot last year, mostly special teams. But
each of those last 2 played all in every game. Yeah,
so those guys have played. The trick is just going to be, it sounds like such a cliche, but it's true. You can't just necessarily bring in 5 offensive linemen. All 5 could have started 12 games last year, but if it was at 5 different schools, that's different because the offensive line, they have to learn how to play together. Having said that, it's not like these are 5 stiffs or 5 freshmen that have never played before. You know, I think it's fair to wonder how that's going to work out. I think it's fair to say USD's offensive line is a question mark, but I think it's also fair, if you're a USD fan, to be optimistic about it, to say there's talent there, and they really love their new offensive line coach, James Bain, who came over. He was the assistant O-line coach for the Gophers. All I've heard every time I'm down to camp is just people raving about what a difference this guy's making.
Interesting.
Well, we saw what a difference Jason Eck made when he took over as the offensive line coach at SDSU, so that's not insignificant.
And when I asked Vitztham in July at MVFC Media Days, what's a part of the field or an aspect of your program that nobody's really talking about that you're expecting to pop? And he said, I don't know if it's going to pop, but I expect our offensive line to be better, to be really good. He feels really good about it because he didn't, basically, I think he feels like it wasn't that good last year. They struggled. They patched it together. They didn't have a lot of depth. He said that
they lost guys in the spring because they had the spring portal. They didn't have to worry about that this year.
That was it.
So even though there's newer guys, they had more time together than last year when they're showing up to camp, kind of meeting each other.
But then you got the size, the experience, the guys who have played for both USD or elsewhere. Jake Utley at UTEP for 17 games in the last 2 years. Caden Ellingson missed 2025, but that's a 6'7", 310 boy from T who's won some big games in the Dakota Dome and the state championship. Guys like Lucas Feldkamp, Brandon Valley. I mean, he was a road grader playing alongside
I'm not surprised to hear that he's been tearing it up in camp.
Yeah. And then, of course, receivers. Tyson Bowes is athletic. Tennell Bryant was great as a returner last year and made a couple wow receptions. This wasn't a prolific passing team that threw it a lot.
Right.
And Lorenzo Fenner ate up a lot of the yards and the big plays, and now he is at Cincinnati, I think. It's either Cincinnati or Louisville. So there's some unprovenness in the receiving corps. That doesn't mean they're not going to be. No one had heard of or paid much attention to Lorenzo Fenner until he started making plays last year.
I think their tight end group could be sneaky good too. There's not a lot of known commodities there, but Jesse Miller's pretty good. I think he had like 15 catches last year. He certainly looks the part. They've got some other guys there. They've been running a lot of 2 tight end 12 and 22 personnel in camp. And that makes sense when you have a young quarterback. Tight ends can kind of be a safety valve, a comfort zone for young quarterbacks. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Yotes utilize the tight ends more this year than they have in the past.
By the way, USD offense last year, very middle of the pack in the Mo Valley. And there was some low wattage early in the year. They got better, but as we mentioned, they won a lot of close, low-scoring games. That's how they got into the playoffs. It wasn't purely on the backs of their defense. It was just on ball control, being willing to punt Iowa football, basically, and big plays on third down and fourth quarter red zone when they needed the most from Aiden Bauman. And
it'll be interesting to see, too, if they increase the tempo this year, if they move away from, like you said, that kind of ball control, shorten the game kind of thing. Because I think that was part of, it's like, okay, our season's getting away from us. We lost a couple games we weren't expected to. They were, 3-4 at one point or something like that?
2-3, and then they were 5-4.
Okay.
For rattling off 3 in a row.
I mean, they were backs to the wall, and that's a lot of times where you do, okay, let's let's pare it down here and try to limit mistakes and shorten the game. That worked for him, and maybe having young quarterbacks or inexperienced quarterbacks, maybe they'll do that again. Maybe they won't. Maybe Vitz wants to open it up a little bit. We'll see.
Yeah. And then we should spend a word or two on the USD defense. Just like their offense, middle of the pack statistically. Fifth in points given up per game. The average score of a USD game last year, by the way,
18-16,
27-26. Seemed lower than that, and there were a couple of those games, but 27-26. They were fourth in the league, and again, when you're fourth in the MVFC, you're still probably top 30 nationally in total defense. They were fifth against the pass, sixth against the run, sixth in third down defense, 8 out of 9 teams or 10 teams in the Mo Valley in fourth down defense. I mean, nothing awesome. And yet Travis Johansson, the head coach, who's the defensive side of the ball, he certainly didn't get the Rutgers defensive coordinator job purely on stats. And he was a big reason why the program in general has turned into a top 5, top 10 MVFC program prior to last year. But this defense misses some guys that were key last year, but returns some key guys, especially in the front 7.
Well, their linebacking group, I think, is what everyone is most excited about. That's where they have the most experience. Their D-line, there's some experience there, too, obviously, with Chris Dixon, and then bringing in a John Starman and Isaiah Ray, I think is his name, the guy from Wayne State. Or is it Wayne State? Concordia, an NSIC guy. Yeah. That unit had a great day on Sunday. They really looked good at the scrimmage. I was impressed with them. And the secondary is, I think there's 1 or 2 starters back there. Every practice I've been to, I've been impressed with the secondary. Now, maybe that's because the quarterbacks aren't doing as well as they hoped. I don't know. But I just know that every practice I've been at, the secondary has looked really good.
Chris Dixon is a name that just keeps getting brought up on the defensive line as a sneaky great player. He's in the middle of the defense. You're not going to see him finish a lot of the plays, but he has been the guy that has allowed others to finish.
He's the wrecking ball.
A big year.
Yeah.
Gabriel Hardman is our guest on tomorrow's USD show from the defense, and he brings some experience and some playmaking to the USD defense as well. So a last word on them, back to the schedule. It's tough. And I don't know if they were all the way down, quote unquote, all the way down at number 5 in the preseason poll because of their schedule, because that's how some people will factor in. This is a team that, Boise State, okay, that's a tough one. That's their money game. That's a CBS network game at 9 p.m. on September 19th. But then in the Valley, you're going to have to go to Youngstown right away after Boise State, and there's no week in between. They're going to be physically and mentally pretty beat up.
They're not going to get back till 7 in the morning after that Boise State game because it kicks off at 9 o'clock on Saturday night. That could mess up their whole week. And then
you travel the other way to Youngstown for a 1 p.m. Saturday game. Have you been to Youngstown? Have you made that trip? Mm-hmm. Not the easiest trip to make.
And neither the Jacks or Yotes seem to play well there very often.
Yeah.
Jacks have been a little better there recently, but that used to be kind of a kryptonite type of stadium for them.
And again, if Youngstown State's offense is anywhere near what it was last year, you're trying to play catch up or back and forth all game with Bo Brungard. Indiana State and Southern Illinois come to the Dome, and obviously Southern Illinois with an experienced quarterback is going to be a tough out. And you go to Murray, Kentucky, but then the back end of the schedule, you do get UND at home on October 24th, but in back-to-back weeks you'll have UND and then SDSU on the road. Then you have Northern Iowa at home, but then you have to finish the season. Playoff spot could be on the line. Maybe a top 8 seed or a home playoff game will be on the line, and you have to go to Illinois State, who's picked to finish second and was national runner-up last year. And we're not going to get much into Missouri Valley talk in this show, but hard to forecast the Redbirds without Tommy Rittenhouse back at quarterback, but they have a running back that's really good that is back, and they have one of the best coaches in the country. And to have to go there in the season finale, that's tough. So they have to play against 3 of the top 5 teams in this league on the road, on Youngstown early, and then South Dakota State and at Illinois State, 2 of their last 3 games. That's a tough schedule.
Yes.
They might not be as their record might not be as good as a team that they will be, but I think they could squeeze into the playoffs.
I think they'll make the playoffs. I think they'll make the playoffs. I think, like I said, when I vote for the preseason poll, I don't just rank them 1 through 9 or whatever. I open up the schedule, go through and pick every single individual game, and then go back and add it all up and see who's out on top. I'm guessing I had USD at 8-4-ish, somewhere in there.
Sounds about right.
We'll see. They could easily be. The thing is, USD could be a good football team this year and go 5-7 or 6-6. You know, sometimes people, how could you pick that team down there? Because they're all good.
Yeah.
Now, that's not the case anymore. There's 3 teams at the bottom that aren't very good. But you've still got those top 6 are all good. You know, there's no shame in being the 6th place team in the Valley. There have been many, many years, especially when the Valley was even deeper, when Indiana State was good, when Northern Iowa was good, when Murray State wasn't in the league, where there were really no bottom feeders, maybe Missouri State, but then they got good. Back then, I would tell people all the time, there's a team in the Valley that went 4-8 this year that is better than probably 7 or 8 teams that are in the playoffs.
Yeah.
That's how good it is.
Yeah.